Hello, welcome back to Slice and Dice. I told you my next video was going to be about Baron and Basalt, but, well, I lost my streak to Baron, so I don't think I'm ready to talk about that guy. But no, someone in the comments for the video talking about the items said, hey, what if you did the characters next? And I went, oh, that sounds fun. Let's talk about the characters, shall we? It's been a long time. I think I last did a video about the characters in January. I did a tier list. At the end of this, I will give you a tier list. Maybe I will do this as a tier list. I don't like doing tier lists. Many people, they say, what about tier lists? What about tier lists? I don't like doing tier lists because I feel like they lead to bad think. You're gonna think about the characters in this strictly binary, this character is better than this character sort of way, and it can cloud your vision. Specifically speaking, a good example of this would be these two characters, Stalwart and Valkyrie. There are going to be times where you're offered these two side by side, and while Valkyrie is going to place higher on the tier list, there are going to be those times where Stalwart is the better pick. So I don't like thinking about it from a tier list perspective. I want to talk about these from the perspective of what they're good at and what they're bad at. So that's why I'm not doing tier lists. I wanted to address that at the start of this because people always talk about tier lists. I did a lot of tier lists for Monster Train, and I feel like it really hurt my understanding of the game. So yeah, we're not going to do it like that for Slice and Dice. We're going to just go about it in this way. Just talk about them, talk about their strengths, their weaknesses, maybe some good item synergies if any come to mind, but we'll see. I don't want to spend too much time on the item synergies, but without any further ado, let's get rolling, shall we? So I am going to talk about the tier 1s very briefly. The thing that you have to understand, unlike the tier 2s and the tier 3s where you're picking those characters over other characters, you're forced to start with the tier 1s, so you want to know who is good and bad at the early game for your tier 1s so that you can understand if you're allowed to take a curse like Add Wolf, for example. I didn't say it at the start of last video, but this is all for hard. I put it in the titles. There are things where some characters are going to be better on different difficulties, and that's fine. This is talking about Classic Hard, and I mean slightly Classic Unfair, but I haven't played much Classic Unfair. So, shall we? Again, also, this is just my opinion. Your opinion may vary, and your opinion is also valid. Don't take it from me as like the law. You can have your own opinion. Let's go. So, I'm just gonna do a general power level of each of the characters in tier 1 here. Starting with the oranges, I think that the stronger two, I'm gonna organize it as stronger and weaker. I think the stronger two are Scoundrel and Lost. Many people hate Scoundrel for good reason, and you would think that I would hate Scoundrel as well, but something you'll find is that specifically in the tier 1s, there's not a whole lot of good value sides. Like Thief, okay. I think Thief is also okay, but I'll talk about the difference here in a moment. But basically, if a fight goes 3 turns and you roll 9 X's on a character like Scoundrel, you got so unbelievably unlucky. It's like crazy. So when Scoundrel hits, you're getting really big impact for an orange tier 1. And the reason that I said 3 turns specifically is because what you'll find is that Scoundrel at 6 HP is going to live a lot longer than any other tier 1 orange will. So I like Scoundrel for this reason. I think Scoundrel is not strong early though, because if you're putting an extra enemy in the fight, it's more damage, which means Scoundrel is going to die faster. However, I think Scoundrel, for the tier 1s, what you actually want to think about is how fast do I need to replace this character? When do they start falling off? So the perfect example of this is Fighter. Fighter is a character who is good for about 6 combats, and then if you still have him going into combat 8, you're probably really sad. So Fighter is someone that you definitely don't want to be keeping to the end, whereas Scoundrel has a side that is impactful all the way up to, honestly, all the way through the game if you had to keep a tier 1. But you don't have to keep a tier 1. So, for the same reason though, you may think Thief is good, but Thief has a problem of having much less HP, and the sides being less impactful when you hit. When you want to weigh these characters, you want to weigh them in terms of how often do they hit, and how impactful is it when they hit. Like if you hit a vulnerable on the right turn, you will just kill a massive health enemy. This side can represent upwards of 6 or 7 damage even, whereas this is always going to be 2. Even if it hits slightly more often. Lost, And Dabble, I mean, Dabble's fine, but Dabble has a lot of really unimpactful sides. Dabble's value is increased a little bit if you have Student or Mage as your starter, because the extra 1 mana will push you into a different, like, tax bracket, basically, for mana, where you can cast your spell an extra time, which is nice, but heal 5, shield 2, and damage 1 are pretty sad. And then Lost is just fine. Careful of, like, Lost with top 3 poisoned, but I haven't actually had it be a problem even. And yeah, you get some 1s which can be 2s, you get a 2 which can be a 4, and you get poison. So I think Lost is probably on the stronger side, you just have to be careful with them. I have the most to say about the oranges. The rest of the colors for tier 1 are pretty straightforward. Hoarder, Brigand, and Fighter are very strong early. Ruffian is a little bit of an egg basket character. You only have this one good side. The Cleave is okay, but again, this is like Scoundrel. You have one big high damage output side and a Cleave. Why don't I like Ruffian? 4 HP, brother. He's also gonna die a lot more, but usually in the first 6 fights when you play this 5 pain, you have killed an enemy, and that is good enough, but if he misses, he is pretty worthless, and he is going to die after he casts. But, you know, on the other hand, Hoarder just does 2s. Brigand has no way to miss and is worst case 1, but it's always worth rolling for the 3, because over 2 turns you're getting 3 damage instead of over 2 turns getting 2 damage. And then Fighter is good until Fighter is bad, like I said earlier. The Greys, I basically have no opinion of. Defender, Buckle. The only Grey that I think is kind of weak is Buckle, because Buckle has very inconsistent ability to contribute damage. Squire doesn't have as inconsistent ability to do damage because you can always roll to 0. Because he doesn't have X's, you're allowed to roll all the way down looking for damage, and if you miss, the worst case is you roll to 1 shield, which is still something to keep someone alive. And then Alloy's fine. Again, the nice thing about Alloy is you always will be rolling a 1, and that's good. And so it lets you roll all the way for mana or repel, which means that you can turn your Grey into a more consistent damage dealer. Whereas Buckle, if you roll this 2 shield and then this 2 shield, and you go for like, oh, well, if I roll a 2 damage, I could win the fight, there's 2 X's here. And then the difference maker is that sometimes you're going to be in a position where 1 shield is enough and 1 damage is enough for lethal, right? And with Squire, you're allowed to reroll, whereas with Buckle, you just have to settle for the 2. So, yeah. And then Defender, he's fine. I don't have anything. I mean, Defender does have 7 HP, which is pretty wicked. But, yeah. The Grey, I basically wouldn't even consider if you're trying to gauge your strength. They're all about the same. I think Buckle is slightly worse. The Reds. Very clear division here. The best red is Splint. The second best is Healer. Acolyte and Mystic can tie for 3rd and 4th, however you want to put it. When you approach the Reds, you just look at how good they are at helping you get mana, and Splint has a 3 and a 2, which will win the fight for you. Healer has a 2, which will be very good, and then these 2 cap at 1. Probably Acolyte is slight. I mean, they're basically the same. 2 Vitality versus 1 Heal Shield mana gain. It's all the same. For spells, Bandage is very good. This spell is whatever. Gain 1 reroll. It's fine. Restore I find to be underwhelming because it's hard to find the time to cast that spell. And Mend is fine. It's basically something that you're going to use as a 1 mana burst to save someone on 1 HP. Alright, and then the blues. Mage is the best, almost universally. Importantly, you have to play around Mage in a specific way, where you, on the first turn... So you have 3 rolls, right? Your first roll is free. On the first roll, you do not keep 1. On the second and third roll, you keep 1. And you're rolling for 2 because Mage's spell is 4 mana, 5 damage. But you're not always going to hit the 2, and you don't want to, like, have no mana, basically. So you have to play it in that specific way for Mage, where you're settling on turn 2 and 3. Student is the villain. Student is very swingy in that this side of reuse will win you a fight, but you have to hit it. I'm pretty sure that depending on the team comp, you are just never supposed to lock Student unless you hit the reuse, but I'm not 100% sure of that. The problem that Student faces is that it's unbelievably difficult to cast this spell in a timely manner because Student's maximum mana generation is 1. So, a lot has to go right for Student to actually contribute a spell cast. Initiate's fine. The bait on Initiate is to lock the 1 mana. The only reason you would ever lock the 1 mana single use is if you need it for a kill. Never otherwise would you lock this, but Initiate does bring the cool Gather spell where you get to start locking X's, which is fun. But, yeah. The nice thing about Initiate is it means that you can't lose to Bramble, which is oftentimes, depending on your curse, a big early game killer. Gather makes you unable to die to Bramble. And then Cultist is fine. Spell is good, just make sure you use this not to kill one of your friends. Don't do it to him. And sometimes you're gonna just kill Cultist, I think. If you roll a 4 and he's got damage coming in, you just let him die sometimes. Cash out your damage and let him go. But be careful that Cultist doesn't start the death snowball where he comes back to life at 2 and then just keeps dying over and over again. It's tough for him. If I were to craft the strongest starting party to me, it's probably something like Mage, Medic, Alloy, Hoarder, and then in that team I think it's Dabble, but it might be Lost. It's really whichever orange except for Thief. That's something that's like a very strong starting team. I think a team that would give me pause to take an add enemy curse is like Scoundrel, Ruffian, Buckle, Mystic, Student. That's the sort of team where it's like, can I actually kill a wolf on turn 1 and 2? Maybe not. But yeah, that's all you really need to think about the tier 1s for. You can figure it out for yourself which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to be getting rid of quickly. A lot of times it's not going to be something you consider, but give it a thought when you're looking at upgrading a character. If you have 2 characters that are very close in power level, look at who they're replacing as well. Alright. Into the tier 2s. I'll timestamp these by color for you as well. Hopefully. Alright, so these are going to be ordered by my pick rate. I will try not to let that skew my opinions, though. In orange, you have Trapper. Trapper is unbelievably strong. The problem that Trapper faces is that they do only have 3 strong offensive sides, but 1 damage vulnerable is so strong that no tier 3 has it, so it's very good, as you're going to find. Yeah, I mean, combo Trapper with Herbalist, Trapper Herbalist, Vine is now 1 mana burst on any target with vulnerable, which is crazy. It auto kills Baron for you, for example. The kill a target with 4 or less HP, also really good. Kills slates for you, kills backline snipers for you because it's ranged. Trapper's very strong. The growth side is whatever. I don't think you ever really lock this, and unless you like super need it. But the problem is, when you lock this side, you are giving up so much damage that you could probably kill the enemy that is requiring you to shield. But sometimes it's not worth the risk, and that's a minute-to-minute choice. But Trapper's really good in general. Trapper's the sort of character you keep to the end of your run. Speaking of which, Spellblade, baby. Spellblade is also very good. Imbue is a great spell. Something that you'll find is that a lot of characters, especially yellow tier 2s, have damage caps at 3, which means that with Imbue you can reach 4 and you can kill zombies and ghosts, which is extremely good. Even if it's one time, that's all you need in a lot of fights. But the flexibility also helps you hit things like the Court's death number, and it'll help you hit, even if you have Spellblade that late, you could use it on Basalt to hit chips. Yeah, Spellblade's good. Spellblade also pairs well with a ton of items. Magic Staff is good on Spellblade because you get the 2s. Sickle. I'll show you. Hold on. Magic Staff. Someone mentioned I missed an item, by the way. Oh yeah, in the last video I missed an item. I should mention that while I'm on here. I missed this item, Tooth Necklace. I don't have anything to say about Tooth Necklace. It's fine. Cruel is good, but oftentimes tier 6s are better. But while I'm in here, and it's on my mind, I may as well mention it. But no, Spellblade has a ton of items that are very good for them. Sickle is just a +1 across the board. Wax Seal is pretty good. Mushroom is bad, but Spellblade is the type of character where if you have the right item, you just keep them, because 2 damage, 2 mana, 2 damage copycat, this character kind of goes nuts, even with just 1+1. Dabbler's fine. The problem with Dabbler is they're not very consistent at giving you mana. It's a single 2 mana side. So you're gonna find yourself going for this character and thinking you're gonna be making big mana off of it, and you're gonna find the reality is the mana is inconsistent and just a nice benefit. You don't count on it, it's just kind of a bonus on top of a character who has decent sides. A 3 and a 2 are okay. The defense is whatever. I've been cooling on Dabbler quite a bit. I think that they're just fine. Ranger's okay. Ranger has the dreaded double X, but the other 4 sides are very strong and very impactful, and ideally you pick up something to cover these 2 sides for you. Short sword, splitting arrow, something like that. But yeah, ranged cleave is good. Pairs well with a certain yellow, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And 2 damage ranged engage is a way to do 4, which is good to see out of your orange because a lot of oranges actually don't have a way to do 4. Ninja is tricky. I hated Ninja for a while. The copycat is very defining, and I think Ninja is a character that's hard to talk about without talking about other characters. If you pick Ninja and your team is something like Soldier, Warden, Herbalist, Jester, right? Ninja's terrible because you have very little to play off of. But if you have something like Bard for charged or Knight for steal, especially Knight steal because it's shield steal, you can put some pretty good numbers up with these copycats. Scrapper's okay. Scrapper's pretty good because of Bloodlust, but the steal is wasted because you're not going to be shielding both of them. But specifically Ninja is a character where they're going to feel very swingy, and you probably have an opinion of I love or I hate Ninja. And the correct answer for Ninja is that Ninja is good if the team supports them well, and the team supports them well if you have things like Knight for steal, Bard for cantrip or shield, or for charge rather. And what you'll find across the board is that what you want out of Ninja's copycat is more than 2 damage, and you want to find keywords that can bring you that. Things like steal, like I've been saying, right? Or charged. And you don't, and I reiterate here because you don't want to be playing for like, oh, well, what about pristine? Pristine is a ×2 on a 1. It's not good enough. Things like cleave, I think, are underwhelming. The other keyword that's good to be on the lookout for is mana gain for Ninja. But I'll move on there. The literary device themselves, old Juggler. I love Juggler. I don't think Juggler is good. I think there are too many characters in this game that ruin Juggler's day. But I do love Juggler. I still think this character is very fun. Juggler Jester, the classic. If you care only about winning, you probably want to keep your Juggler pick rate a little lower. Only pick them if they're up against something much worse. But oh man, I love watching Juggler throw a 2 damage into a Thorns and die. That's the life. Gambler I've been picking more lately, and it is very feast or famine to play Gambler. They have one good side and a bunch of garbage. Even with a good top-bottom replacer like Worn Arms, I think Gambler finds themselves coming up a little short. But, you know, realistically speaking, Gambler is a necessary evil where you pick this character because the other option is really bad, or you have Longbow, and then you pick Gambler and you pop off with the 5. Gambler's a character who's inconsistent though, so you want to combo them with something like Bard, like Jester to give more rerolls to help you connect with the 5 more often. Don't settle. Basically, the thing you have to understand about Gambler is that if you ever settle for the 1 damage, the game won. Never lock this. Even if it's supposed to be lethal, I don't care. Die on this hill. Lose your run to save yourself the 1 damage. The disgrace. Rogue. You would think I would like Rogue because they have no X's, but this character feels like they do so little. I don't know, my opinion of Rogue is still a little up in the air. I think that 2 damage Cruel is pretty nice, but 2 cantrips and 2 poisons, it's tough, man. It just feels like Rogue contributes so little, even if they can't miss. They can miss, though. It's kind of disingenuous, because if they're not taking any attacks, then this is basically an X. So, you know, Rogue isn't bad, but I don't want to pick them. That's what it comes down to. They're not, like, bottom of the barrel, though. Alright, we'll go on to the yellows now. The yellows are stacked. Tier 2 yellows are pretty good. There are a few stinkers in here, though. Start off with the boy, Berserker. something that you're gonna come to realize is that 4 damage Pain and 3 damage Death Wish is very good. It doesn't matter about the 2 X's. This guy pulls up, he drops 4s, he dies, he leaves. He's great. He's great. He's just very good. You give him some health, he lives more often. You give him some side replacers, he's more consistent. 8 HP is good. This is the guy. Scrapper, man. I for a really long time, I hated Scrapper. I was such a hater of Scrapper. And then someone in Twitch chat said to me, I don't get the Scrapper hate. I love that guy. And I was like, really? Okay. Because he was on my screen. I just clicked him over something boring. I don't remember what the other option was. I just took him and I was like, oh, what the hell? He's going nuts. Scrapper is good because Bloodlust is good. That's what it comes down to. Bloodlust is really, really good. If you look at the other tier 2 or tier 2 yellows, right? What you're gonna find real quick is like 3s and 2s, 2s and 3s, 2s and then a conditional 4, 3s and 2s, Whirl who's like 3s and then AoE, and then like a 4 with a big downside and a cleave, right? It's really easy for no downside to make this 1 damage Bloodlust a 4. And 4 damage with no downside whatsoever is crazy. It's so good. Scrapper, however, is defined by the rest of your team, very much so. Scrapper is defined by how good the rest of your team is at making this Bloodlust good on turn 1. So we'll talk a little bit about the characters who are great at that. It's actually a lot of the oranges. It's Ranger because of 1 damage cleave, it's Juggler because of cantrip, it's Rogue because of cantrip, it's not really Trapper, but Trapper's okay at it. Ninja goes very well with Scrapper as well because you can copy the Bloodlust, and a second Bloodlust is so nuts. Ninja Scrapper is a real 2 yellow combo. Or yellow-orange tier 2 combo, I should say. So there are other characters that go well with him, like Herbalist and Druid go very well here because of AoE 1 to all and Vine. And of course, I'm sure you're going to imagine I'm going to mention Fiend here for the same reason. 1 to all, very good. Scrapper is also inconsistent, same for Berserker, so any inconsistent character is going to have a natural synergy with one of the 2 cantrip characters. But don't hang your hat on these, they're going to miss sometimes too. Yeah, and then the steel side is also fine, because if you're in a bad position where it's like you need to do 4 damage or 5 damage to kill a ghost, Scrapper is always 2 bursts away from that if you have good mana gain, or just a good shield away. So, Scrapper is really good, and I'm sorry to Scrapper that I was so hard on him early on in my time. I didn't know. Brute is just fine. Like, Brute is actually just the middle of the road, very okay guy. 3 damage heavy is whatever, 2 damage self-shield is fine. The stun is very good, and Brute is very good at just showing up and not dying and dispensing 2 damage, and sometimes 3. And occasionally he'll do something cool like stun a summon or something. Collector is also just naturally very much okay. Lots of 2 damages, no X's is nice. The problem is that sometimes the Exert is an X, because the 3 damage is wasted, and if you have no Collector play on the following turn, it's just sad. But yeah, I think Collector is just fine. He's not going to carry your run, and he's not going to be this mid-game powerhouse, but he's also not going to be useless, so he gets a pass. I've had the most trouble with Gladiator figuring out what I actually feel about this character. Gladiator was one of my favorite yellows back in the day when I started playing. I don't love him as much anymore because the 2 damage engage is hard to play. It's hard to hit, and it's hard to actually feel like it does anything. Sometimes it does great, but importantly, Gladiator can't kill ghosts with his 4 damage. And he's pretty bad on bosses, but he does show up to work, and he has 2 damage self-shield, so he's hard to kill. So he's good for that, and sometimes you get the bonus of 2 damage engage, which is nice. So it's kind of hit or miss for Gladiator, but it's worth mentioning that Gladiator has big synergy with any character that can buff his engage side. This goes also for Collector, but Collector less so because it's only on the focus and it's only 1 damage. Gladiator has big synergy with things like Armor and Spellblade. I wouldn't say big synergy with Armor, but good synergy with Armor, decent synergy with Spellblade because of Imbue, because suddenly engaging for 6 is some big number. But yeah, I don't really know how I feel about Gladiator. Gladiator, I guess one more thing, he has an anti-synergy with Juggler because cantrips fuck up engage, so be on the lookout for that. And anti-synergy with like Ninja plus Bard as well. Soldier is actually the most straightforward of the characters to rate. Soldier is good if you're seeing him as one of your first like 3 character picks, because at that point 3 damage and 2 damage is going to be fine, and Soldier is bad after that. And if you don't replace Soldier by combat like 14 or 16, you're probably really doomed, because this guy scales horribly. But he can just drag you through a bad early game and he's consistent, which is nice. Fucking Whirl. Dude, I loved Whirl. I loved Whirl so much. If you go back to the tier list video I made at 5 wins, put Whirl in like A or maybe even S tier. This character is so bad. I was unbelievably wrong. And so the reason I was wrong is because I valued this 1 damage cleave and the 1 damage to all very highly. And something I found pretty quickly is that it's just way easier to play 1 damage to all from the reds and the blues and not give yourself a worthless yellow. Sorry, Whirl. I think Whirl is good if you're playing Armor or Fae, though, because you can suddenly get this up to like 3 damage. The perfect team for Whirl is Spellblade, Armor, or Fae, Whirl, and then pick a blue. Maybe Jester to help him hit. Then you just super juice him and do some 5s, but no, Whirl's pretty bad. The bastard child. Sinew. This character sucks for a few reasons. 4 damage Exert is good, and the problem is the rest of him is really bad, and 4 damage Exert... Here's the trade-off, right? 4 damage Exert means you get to do 4 damage now and 0 damage on the next turn, so you're basically doing 2 damage twice instead of 4 damage, right? If you look at each character's damage over multiple turns, Sinew is effectively doing 2 per turn if you're rolling 4 damage Exert every time it's up. Compare that to this guy, Berserker. You're getting 4 damage per turn, and then you can also just pivot off and do 3 or 1, and sometimes that 3 is a 6, and if you have to, you can just kill him or defend him. You have a lot more flexibility in making it so that Berserker's 4 damage doesn't kill him, and you can fight the drawback a lot more, whereas Sinew's 4 damage is extremely, extremely hard to play with, because there is no counterplay. Once you're exerted, you're out for the next turn. You can't do anything about that. But what about the combo? This is bad. I want you to understand, many people, the combo, Sinew plus Ninja, it's so good. It's not good. Stop being baited. This side sounds cool. It's terrible. You're gonna go through all of these hoops, man. I've done it. You're gonna jump through all of these fucking hoops. You're gonna set yourself up with some character locking suboptimal sides to cleave, and you're gonna get 2 damage cleave, and you're gonna die. And you're gonna go, damn, but I hit the chain. Don't do it to yourself. The other problem is that Sinew has 2 defensive sides, which really sucks, because why the hell is your yellow shielding? I don't care about this, and neither should you. And he has an X. Get off my screen, Sinew. You disgust me. He's okay in a pinch, though. If you're having a really rough mid-game, you have really bad damage, he can show up and do 4. And the 4 is nice because it's front-loaded through Exert. So, there's that. Alright, time for Grays. We're just gonna keep going. Warden is good. Warden is probably the best tier 2 Gray, if I were to guess. The thing is, damage from your Grays is very inconsistent. Many of the Grays just can't do damage and can't do damage very well. So a Gray popping in with 2 damage is sweet. No X's, the ability to do big shields. Just don't lock the 2 and the 1 shield unless you have to. And by you have to, I mean you need it to save a character. Dude, I loved Monk so much. Monk was like my #1. I thought this character was so broken. He's just fine. He's not bad. Monk is okay, but the repel ones are pretty underwhelming. The cleanse is nice and the redirect is good. Monk doesn't have anything super special going for him, but you know, sometimes the repel pops off. Armor I've also cooled on quite a bit. Armor is very cool. Armor has very specific characters they need to be played with though. There's one thing that I think Armor is good for, where the Smith really gets to shine. No, it's not Sinew's Chain. Armor is really good at playing with this. 1 damage or 1 shield mana gain sides. This becomes significantly better because you're getting to double your mana gain and do 2 damage. For 2 characters, it's a lot of value to get to do 2 damage and a free burst and a shield 1. On top of that, Armorer will pair well with, you know, the obvious stuff. Death Wish if you can get it, Cleave, things like that. The smithing is good. The important thing to recognize with this character is when you need to lock Smith and when you need to roll for Shield 4, and basically never lock the 3 damage heavy, because if you picked Armorer, it has to be because you have something good to Smith, and if you don't have anything good to Smith, then you need to be defending, I feel. I just feel like this 3 damage heavy side is often such a bait. Don't fall for it. Knight is fine. Knight is like very middle of the road. 3 damage from your gray is cool, but the exert really sucks. Make sure that you think ahead to what the following turn is going to look like, because you don't want your knight exerted and then having someone die because of it. Knight is also a good character to take to cover picking up ninja. I like to often think about characters like this as I'm taking this to be sure I don't have something worse happen to me later, like statue or ninja, for example. It's good for that. Bard. He's the tip of the iceberg, because the tier 2 grays, they look all like, oh man, Warden, he's so good. Oh man, Monk, how exciting. Armor, ooh, that's fun. And then you start to see the cracks in the armor here with Knight. Then you see Bard and you go, hang on a second. What's going on here? So Bard has no actual way to be helpful on offense unless you get really good value out of 2 mana. Some runs do, and what Bard also does is Bard helps the rest of your team connect with this cantrip. So Bard's good at helping inconsistent characters hit more consistently, and so for that reason I think Bard is okay. I would be much harder on Bard if the other 3 characters in tier 2 gray didn't exist, but Charge Shield can be good. You can put some cool items like Ambrosia on this. There are a lot of item combos that I'm just going to skip over because it would really take too long to talk out every item combo. Please do feel free to tell me about them in the comments though. Tell me your cool item combo synergies. I think that there are a lot of them. Like, there are too many to cover. That is part of the fun of this game. But overall, Bard is going to do okay because the reroll cantrip is nice, and contributing 2 mana will sometimes push you over the finish line on a bad turn. But in a longer fight, if you have to save someone else, or Bard, probably save someone else. Ah, the delinquents. Statue is statue. I really don't think that you need me to tell you much more than that. There is only one thing that I will tell you from my experience in this game. Statue is very good at beating the 3 witches fight for you. I will bring this up, because here's the thing. The 3 witches fight, Gaitha, Magrat, Agnes. If you have okay damage and you're walking into that fight and you're a little worried that you're just going to get steamrolled because they can put out crazy damage, the statue will actually just lock Gaitha out of the fight for 3 turns, pretty much. And that's what statue is actually good for, is just taking heavy hits. The problem is that you don't know when there's going to be an enemy with a heavy hit on the board. But specifically, I've been in the position where I was offered 2 characters. The other character was probably, I think it was Rogue, but I don't remember exactly what it was. And I picked Statue going into the 3 witches, and Statue crushed the 3 witches for me. Gaitha was just out of the fight for 3 turns. I got to focus on the other 2 characters. I got super far ahead, where otherwise my damage would not have been enough to kill a witch. So, you know what? Statue has a use case. And of course, if you have good statue items, you have a good statue. But be careful. Don't pick statue for fun. Or do. I'm not really in charge. You can do whatever you want. Because at the end of the day, this is a game, and if you want to have fun, have fun. Pick statue. Go nuts. Tell me about your statue Viscera combo, Cranberry. This is a shout out to you specifically, Cranberry. Type about statue Viscera. I'm listening. It sounds like a lot of fun. Oh, Guardian. 4 out of 29, dude. Oh, man. How do I begin? So Guardian's damage is bad because 1 damage cleave is not very high, and in a lot of fights this is useless. Guardian's shield is bad because shield 2 engage is low once the fight goes past turn 1. Shield 2 cleave is good. This is a good side. So Guardian has 1 good side and 3 very mediocre sides and 2 X's. I don't like this guy, but I think that the cleave could be good if you're trying to get Bloodlust going for Scrapper. So there's that at least. Yeah, Cleric. 3 out of 33, dude. This character is abhorrent. I don't know how else to put it. If you think about mana as 2 mana equals 2 damage, Cleric has 2 single damage sides and a cleanse. I would like Cleric a lot if Cleric wasn't 6 HP. 6 HP is really offensive though. If this character was like 7 or 8 HP, these sides would be really good because Heal Shield 2 is, after turn 1, often going to represent 4 defense for you, which is really good. For no downside, it's 4 defense. That's strong. But what you're going to find is that 1 mana sucks. I think someone said to me, Cleric is good if you treat the 1 manas as X's, and I disagree. That's it. I think the only use case for Cleric is you are really desperate for Cleanse, or Cleric is up against Statue. That's basically it. Alright, I'm gonna sit up. We're in the reds now. The reds are stacked. Tier 2 reds are extremely, extremely stacked. Herbalist is one of the stronger characters just across the board in the game. Not because of the sides, but because Vine. As it turns out, 1 mana, 1 damage is really good for a number of reasons. Primarily it's because there are enemies like Slate and Basalt. Not Basalt. Slate and... who is it? Hydra. Hydra is what I'm trying to think of. Where it's just, you have to do 5 instances of damage, and where Burst costs 10 to kill that enemy, Vine costs 5. The rest of the sides are pretty bad. You just roll Herbalist for 2 mana, and then you Vine enemies or allies as needed. I'd like to take a moment here, because I forgot about this. Reds are a group of heroes, and blues are a group of heroes. Red and blue, I classify them in 2 different ways. So, there are... I'm going to do these together, actually. I'm going to talk about this classification all at once. There are the characters who are mana-hungry carries, and there are the characters who are self-sufficient supports. So mana-hungry carries in blue, for example, are Evoker, because he has 3 mana to do big damage, and Caldera, 3 mana to do big damage. You could argue Seer as well, and I suppose Sparky. So you could argue these, but the consistent carries are these 2, and then the inconsistent carries are these 2. Then blue has the low mana requirement supports. Glacia, who has a single cast spell. It's not going to win you the fight, but it helps you support your team and decent mana gain. Jester, who has a very cheap spell and support for your team through the cantrip. Fiend, who has just AoE damage for 1. And Maiko, who has the little boost on Spore. So when thinking about this, you want to pair your characters appropriately. So for example, there are the consistent mana generators to go along with this. These are the reds. These are Herbalist, Druid, and Disciple. These are your 2 mana 2 generators, the 2/2s. They generate you 2 mana consistently because they have 2 mana sides. And then you have your more inconsistent mana generator, which is Vampire. And I suppose Medic as well. Yeah, I mean also Medic, but yeah, so Vampire and Medic, where they have 1 2 mana side and then do something else, and then you have your more self-sufficient supporting reds. That's Fae, that's Enchanter, and that's Priestess, where they don't generate as much mana, but they bring other utility. It's important to understand this distinction between the characters because it matters when talking about them. Despite Vampire being very good, I would not pick Vampire if my blue was Evoker. That's what you have to understand here. Because Vampire is very good at generating you 2 damage. Not necessarily 2 mana, but 2 damage. Because you get the 2 damage self-heals, you have 3 ways to do damage, which is impactful. And then you have the 2 mana, which is a little more flexible. Vampire also very good at just staying alive, and Vampire's spell is okay. But I find myself having trouble to cast this because it's expensive, and Vampire's mana generation is inconsistent. But that's alright. Vampire is very good at holding empty max HP items because the self-heal will be wasted on turn 1 typically, so you can get a little extra HP. And yeah, that's basically it. The distinction is important. Pick Vampire if your tier 2 blue is already selected or you're planning on taking a more independent blue, is how I will refer to them. Similar thought for Fae as with Vampire. Fae is good because Weaken is good and Boost is good. +1s push you over damage thresholds to kill enemies sometimes with a 4. You also get double value on things like Death Wish, Cruel, etc. Really though, the story of Fae is weakening an enemy who is summoning is unbelievably strong and will swing fights absurdly in your favor. And on top of that, Circle is a good spell. Circle can dig you out of some bad spots sometimes, but don't think about it too much. Druid is good because Druid brings 2/2s, and Druid brings 1 damage to all enemies for 3. The heal 1 to all allies is negligible, but 1 to all enemies is nice. And mana is good, cleanse is good, and you actually have a way to do 2 damage as well. So Druid is sort of like an inverse vampire, where you have 3 ways to do 2, but you get 2 manas and a 2 damage. Sometimes that growth will matter. But yeah, I would say that these 4 are your poster children. These are the ones where you're like happy to see them and you're defining your mid game around, I picked Fae, I'm gonna pick a blue to match it. And then these 4, well, Priestess is one of the most efficient characters in the game at digging you out of a pit. Flash is incredible and can keep you alive very well. I have made many runs, more than should have ever happened, where a mid-game plan is Priestess plus Seer, where Seer just generates mana and slowly builds, and then I have to spend that mana as much as I need to on Flash to keep my team alive. Important thing to note is that Flash, because it's heal and shield 1, it'll save you from poison as well. Priestess is very good at stringing along a bad run, and Priestess is not very proactive. This is a character where your fights are going to go long. But 3 Vitality heal is really strong. This is okay for heal 1, mana gain 1, and heal 1 to all allies is whatever. Runs where I have to play Priestess are typically runs that I'm not happy playing because I'm about to spend an hour thinking, but Priestess is good nonetheless. I just don't pick them very often because they're worse than the others. Disciple is also settling. If you have a strong blue carry and you need mana gain, you probably pick Disciple because Disciple is fine. It gives you mana, the rest of it is whatever. Sometimes the revive will win you a run. And then the Delinquents. Enchanter is disgusting. This character has no redeeming quality. Sorry, I should tell you about Disciple's ability, Glow, by the way. I've never willingly cast this and had it feel anything other than sad. Enchanter is disgusting. The only good thing about Enchanter is that you can combo Enchanter with something like Lightning Rod or Berserker to try to string yourself along with the self-healing and the self-shielding. The problem is that Enchanter is very bad at saving herself, and that can just really wind up to be a problem, I think. Also, 1 cleanse. What the hell? It's better than an X, I guess. This spell is also, I think, many people's pick for worst spell in the game. Heal 3 flanking for 2. The problem is that flanking hits top and bottom of your team. Those are the 2 characters who are taking the least damage. It's so hard for Wings to do anything. Enchanter disgusts me, but not as much as Medic. Oh god, I hate Medic. Holy moly, I do not like this character. The 2 cleanse is good and the 2 mana is good, but something you're going to find is that it's really hard to play something like heal 2 cleave on your team and have it do anything other than feel bad. Like, it's really just not that good of a side. And having it be the main focus of this character, I don't know. You can string yourself along pretty well with heal 2 cleave, I suppose, but I think you're better off just looking for something else. If you have to pick Medic, you probably had to settle. But Renew is okay. 2 mana, set a hero to 6 HP. It's playable, but I think these 2 characters are borderline avoid at all costs. They are pretty bad, although Enchanter did have a cool run with Pain Edges recently for me, which was nice. So there are playstyles where I think the self-heal is very valuable, but I value self-heal sides very lowly. The side that you're giving self-heal to has to be game-winning, I feel. Alright, now we get the blues. You've already gotten a little bit of an idea of what I mean with the blues. If you are just skipping ahead to this point, you do need to go back and watch the reds. I'm not going to reiterate what I said about the carry versus self-sustaining blues. And I'm just going to talk as it is. So Glacia's really good. Weaken is strong. Glacia has 2 sources of weaken. You can effectively stop enemies for 2 turns through Glacia, which is good. And Glacia has no X's. You get to just keep rolling for 1 mana or 2 mana, or the shield, right? Until you use up your weaken anyway. Jester is okay. I value Jester very highly when I started playing. I think Jester is just fine. The thing that I've learned about Jester in recent days is that the only thing you should do with this 1 mana is reroll it unless you have to lock it to find lethal. Other than that specific circumstance, you should probably just keep rolling for the 3 mana, and when you hit it, you should go, oh baby, we hit. The reroll, though, as I've said throughout, very nice because it helps other characters connect with their important sides, and Jester has a dodge which can get you out of some bad situations, but 6 HP spooky. Caldera's good. That's it. I mean, Caldera's just good. Scald is a great ability. There are some fights where Scald is going to just completely bulldoze the whole combat for you, 2 damage to all damaged enemies. And there are some fights where it's going to do very little, but you also have this cool 3 damage Cruel. The bad part about Caldera, of course, is 6 HP and no defensives. But he has good mana income, he has the ability to do damage himself, he has a good Cruel. Caldera pairs particularly well, of course, with Druid, who can do 1 damage to all enemies to set you up for a nice Scald on a future turn. And he pairs well with Whirl, actually, surprisingly. Just anyone with cleaves and ways to do 1 damage. Also, you know, mana gain characters like Caldera and Glacia are going to naturally pair well with Ninja to give her another side to play off of. Evoker's a tough one. I think Evoker is good, but unbelievably reliant on your tier 2 red being good. If you pick Evoker Fae, your run is much worse off, because Evoker has to connect with the 3 mana side. This goes back around to something that I said earlier, which is how much impact does a side have when you hit it, because Evoker is obviously pretty inconsistent, but when he connects with good mana sides, he is doing way above his weight class for damage, and that's important to note. It's why Evoker is at least okay here, where sometimes other characters are like a little bit iffy. I'm looking at you, Gambler. You know, just be wary. Be careful you don't lock this 1 too often. Also, make sure you're rolling it down for the 3 or the 2, I think. I think locking the 1 is wrong, but I'm not 100% on that. Evoker is good. He can carry your mid game, but you need to pair him with Herbalist, Disciple, or Druid, or else you're going to have a really bad time. Fiend is fine. I have a low Fiend pick rate, but I actually don't think Fiend is bad. As I've said, I've already talked about Fiend with Bloodlust, so I won't reiterate that. But Fiend does pair well with anyone who needs enemies damaged for Bloodlust. Have to be careful about the self-damage as well, but it's usually not that big of a problem. Yeah, no, I really don't have anything to add about Fiend. I think he's just fine. 6 HP is scary, but he stands on his own, so you can combo him pretty well with something like Vampire, Priestess, whatever you want here. Fae, even. Myco I used to like a lot. I was a huge Myco supporter. I think Spore is good. First and foremost, I think Spore is a good side, or a good spell. Again, the +1s are just good. It's nice to have the ability to gain 1 damage, push a breakpoint, kill an important enemy. The problem that Myco faces is that 4 of his sides, despite being filled out, are really bad to play. Playing Shield 1 growth and 1 damage growth, and also 1 mana decay and single revive, these are all really bad. Myco really feels like he only has 2 sides, and sometimes it's gonna just go multiple turns without connecting with mana, I find. But, you know, sometimes this revive is gonna save your life, so there's that as well. But I really struggle to see Myco being good. I don't think he's bad, I think he's more of a necessary evil, where your other pick is really bad, so you just take Myco, and then he's fine, right? But I don't think he's upper half, I think he's lower half of characters. Oh, Sparky. So I will say, in Sparky's defense, this spell is really good. Zap is excellent, but Sparky really needs mana generation from his allies because these 0 damage charge sides are extremely hard to play. I think that if you pick Sparky, what you have to do is you have to accept that this character is one side, and that one side is this 2 damage mana gain. This side is incredible. If Sparky rolls 2 damage mana gain, you're winning fights. This is such a good hit, but the problem is that 5 of his other 6 sides are effectively X's. So you gotta be careful in that regard, but Zap is a good spell. Kill an enemy with exactly 4 HP. It's not that hard to set an enemy to 4 HP. And then this is then 3 damage for 4 mana. It's 3 damage for 4 mana, the same as Evoker's is, but it has more utility and more reach because you can hit any target instead of the top target, and you can kill through heavy and intangible. But just be aware of the fact that Sparky is a one-side character. These are never going to do anything for you. It's very unlikely. Oh, Seer. I love Seer. Seer is one of my favorite characters in this game. I think he's not very good, but he's fun. Fertel is really cool. Fertel is a lot of fun. You get to just slow build mana gain, but there really is no other character in this game like Seer. He encourages you to play the most slow, methodical style in the universe, where you're just slow building mana until you blow enemies away. Some bosses, Seer just completely farms. Lich, Slime Queen, where you can just keep them sitting there and you just build your mana up and then destroy them in one turn. And some bosses, Seer is completely useless because the boss is a race. Something like Bell, Seer is pretty terrible. So, you know, I don't think that you should pick Seer because he's good. I think you should pick Seer because he's fun. And sometimes you're going to pick him over something like Medic or Statue, and you're going to be fine with it. Basically, that's it. Worth mentioning, you could put like Stasis on him or whatever, but I don't feel like you want to talk about endgame item combos for something like Seer. Alright, on to the tier 3s. We'll just go in order. I have no reason not to. Tier 3 starting with Orange. My highest pick rate is Dabalist. I feel like I never see Dabalist. Dabalist, similar to Dabbler, is fine. Again, exact same thoughts as Dabbler for Dabalist. The mana gain is inconsistent. You're not going to see it too often, so don't bank on it. But Dabalist is a great early game pickup where you pick them up on like combat 12, combat 14, and they just carry your late game into the boss. They never really fall off either. 5 shield, 5 heal. They're decent. Roulette. If you watch the content, you know I'm a big Roulette believer. I think Roulette is great because all of Roulette's sides are really good. 2 damage cantrip, 2 damage cleave, and a 5 damage side are all great. If you have a way to cover the left side, that's good too. Play this. If you have determination, play this and just go through with the death. If you have a way to gain value on dying, play this. If you have surgeon, play this. Like really, something that I found the more and more that I play this game is that you should probably just lock in Roulette. Almost every time I lock in Roulette, I don't regret it. The only bad thing is you can pick Roulette, say I'll hit something later that'll make this good, and then have Roulette die immediately and then have a fight spiral out of control. But important to note that even if they die, you're getting 7 damage on the way out, which is good. I think Roulette is very strong. Assassin is like the definition of fine. Very much textbook, just good enough. You get 4 damage, you get a 3 damage cruel, and you get a 3 damage poison. 3 damage poison will swing a lot of boss fights for you in your favor. Dodge is nice to get out of stuff. Assassin is like upper middle for sure. They are absolutely okay to play. Fencer, very item and team dependent. Sometimes this side, 2 damage double use, is just going to win you a game, and sometimes Fencer is going to feel pretty worthless. But great items for Fencer exist. Anything that gives +1s is good. You get no X's, you get the ability to dodge. You can go all in on this Pristine and just put some big damage out. I think something worth mentioning is Serration on Fencer is very good because you get 4 damage of vulnerable spread as you like. And yeah, I think Fencer is fine. Very much middle of the road. Sick hat. But oranges are not super stacked in terms of value of character. So a lot of times you'll find me keeping Trapper or Spellblade as a result. Over the tier 3s anyway. Venom is good at boss killing, and Venom is okay at the rest of the game. The problem is that Poison ramps slowly and this game is fast, but despite that, Venom is alright. If you haven't seen it, the Plague side will also kind of go off. Venom plays well if you have a way to poison yourself, or if you are forced to poisoning yourself, I should say. Things like Wine, things like the top 3 Poison Curse make Venom a little bit better, but typically speaking, you're going to pick Venom because you're going into a boss and you're not sure you're going to kill them. And then Venom's going to drop big poison and win you the day. Sharpshot is fine. I'm a hater. I am often classified as a hater, but Sharpshot is good. The big thing about Sharpshot is if combats go long enough, you will inevitably hit this copycat side, and if you have anything to combo off of it with, this will often just crush. This will swing combat super in your favor. So Sharpshot's good for that. And 3 damage across the board is good. They can carry a lot of good items. Like Wax Seal, of course, does well. Many ways to make Sharpshot just fine. I'm not mad to play Sharpshot, but I'm not excited either. Dancer is... No, I'll talk about him. Sorry, it was a good bit, but this video is informative first and then focused on the bit second. Ludus is okay. I am a hater, and you know this. I am willing to admit it. Ludus is fine. Ludus is again the sort of character that you're gonna pick because you need to get through the mid to late game, and Ludus shows up and averages like 3.5 damage per turn, and that's good enough. Probably a little higher, actually. Probably somewhere in the range of like 4 to 4.5 damage per turn with Ludus, really. But Ludus is good at getting you out of combats 12 and 14 because the damage output is decent, and you know, there are items to put on Ludus to make them better. Self Shield is good. Anything that replaces right sides is good. You can Silk Cloak them too. It's fine. You can play Ludus. I don't think Ludus is good, but I think Ludus is another necessary evil. They're not terrible. They're just not great. There was a pretty good one recently where I gave Ludus Helm of Power and just cashed out like 18 damage or some shit like that. That was decent. 12 damage? I don't remember. I think it was 12 damage. Anyway, Ludus is a necessary evil. Play Ludus if you have to. It's hard to know when you have to, but the answer to when you have to is, are you going to die in the next 4 combats from when you see Ludus? And if that's yes, then probably pick them. Dancer is sweet. I actually really like Dancer. You get the reroll to help get your other characters to hit more consistently, and you get this nice little damage 1 to all with Rampage, which can be used just to damage the enemies or to wipe out fights if you can buff it enough times. It doesn't take a lot, and by it doesn't take a lot, I mean it takes like 2 or 3 pluses to this, and suddenly this will start knocking out entire fights for you, which is good. Dancer pops off. And they have no X's. Really just very decent. But the problem is that your other oranges are a little better, I find. Alright, on to the yellows. This is the Golden Child, by the way. There's one character on this save file left with a 100% pick rate across my 110 runs, and it's this guy. Old Barbarian. Old Reliable. He gets real mad, he has 12 HP, he pops in, he does 8 damage, he does 6 damage, he dies, he fucks off, he comes back next fight, he does the same. That is the worst case. The worst case of Barbarian is he's dropping like 12 to 14 damage in a combat and then leaving. That is enough to swing most fights in your favor. Add in item combos, hero combos, the fact that he just has no X's, Barbarian is always able to cash out. This is a great character to just bulldoze through runs. There was one recently where I believe I had ballet shoes to swap the sides, and then I had brimstone to give a triple, and my Barbarian did 30 damage to Hexia on turn 1, and then the fight ended because that's how much HP Hexia has. It turns out in this game, by the way, the true lesson to take away from Barbarian is that there is an amount of damage where you will start to just crush entire fights with it, and it's somewhere around 6 to 8 average damage, where the flat damage is enough to just bulldoze combats. Eccentric is good. I think the important thing to know about Eccentric is that you have to... Rather, if you're picking Eccentric early into the run, like Combat 12, Combat 14, Eccentric is just going to be good because you have time to fill in the X's. And if you're picking them later, you either have good items or the other option is really bad. I'm going to compare Eccentric to someone who I have become a bit less of a fan of lately, and that's Sorcerer. The difference maker here, and I will talk about it a little more with Sorcerer, Eccentric sides are impactful. If you roll any one of these, you're getting pretty good value out of it anyway. So even though he has 3 X's, you're getting big value when you connect, so it's okay to risk the triple X to just get some 4 damage or some 4 damage to send in there. Eccentric is good, give him left and middle replacers and he's great. Bash is good. This is like, he shows up to work, he does 5 damage, he does 7 damage, he stuns, he leaves. goes home back to his wife and kids. That's Bash. He's 10 HP, he's really hard to kill. Very important thing here is that 7 damage is a big breakpoint. This is enough to kill a Caw in one hit on hard, which is good. And yeah, I like him. Bash is good. Veteran is also good. I was a long time Veteran doubter, but Veteran holds items really well, and Veteran, much like Ludus, can show up to work and get you through a rocky mid to late game because he just pulls up with 11 HP, tanks a bunch of damage, drops 4s and 3s, and then pieces out. He's good. He's not spectacular, but there are items that'll make him run winning for you. Things like Dumbbell, things like Sickle, where you get to bring these numbers up quite a bit, turn Veteran into a real menace. I don't like Leader. I'll just say, I know my pick rate 11 of 22, I don't like Leader. The problem is that these sides, the 3 damage, the 2 duplicate, they're really not good. So Leader feels like he's only 2 sides, Reuse and Smith 2. Smith 2 has some really high output, because if you're smithing a Pristine, you're getting 4, if you're smithing a Cleave, you're getting 6. It's really good for that. If you're smithing a Mana Gain, you're getting a lot. You're getting 2 mana plus 2 damage or 2 shield. So he's good for that, and the Reuse is good, but he's not a carry, and he's inconsistent. This is the sort of character you pick because the rest of your team is so solid that your yellow doesn't matter, and sometimes Leader will do something nice. Brawler's good. I just don't see him very often. I think Brawler is fine. He's another, he shows up to work. Extremely sticky, hard to kill. 3 damage self shield with 9 HP. This character is very, very hard to get rid of. He's also a good character to go infinite with Lich's Tome with because he has 2 damage Rampage. Being able to buff up Rampage in any way will let Brawler start to wipe out fights. And the steal is okay too. Really what you're going to find with Brawler is he shows up, he does 3 damage every turn, and he does not die. And that is okay. He's not nothing to write home about, but he's okay. Curator's fine. I've been a long time doubter of Curators, but he is fine. The thing is, this is 6 damage. Sometimes you just have to kill him to get away with combats. This side is really bad, the Era, but even in its worst case, it's 1 damage. And then Steel, Charged, and Bloodlust, you're usually going to be able to get some pretty big numbers out of, especially Charged. So he has like 4 really good sides and then 2 mediocre sides with no X's, and that's okay. Curator's fine. I don't think that he's someone to hate. I think that he's just okay. This is this game's Alpha Fiend, for sure. If you watch Monster Train, this is this game's Alpha Fiend. Alpha Fiend is a character in Monster Train. He's a unit. He's very fun. He's very cool. His idea, he hits every turn and he gets more powerful. And I liked him a lot on launch, and he was fucking awful. I love the concept. This character is so bad. Wanderer is legitimately one side. This is the only thing. And so there are going to be times where Wanderer is not the bottom of the barrel. There are worse characters in this game than Wanderer, and there are going to be times where you have to pick Wanderer because the other option is so bad. But quad use 1 damage needs support to be playable. If you can buff this side, it's obviously going to go nuts, but he's a one-side character. He's very much like Sparky. But you're going to say to me, oh, well, what about the Era? How many fights do you have? And how many fights do you see me play where the fight goes beyond, like, turn 2 and doesn't look like it's decided? Most fights are decided by turn 3 or turn 4 at the latest. So if your team is really, really slow, I think you can play Wanderer and be okay with the Era. But what you're going to find is that Era is pretty bad a lot of the time because combats are decided on 2 or 3 on the final boss. But what about Inflict Pain? It's like 15 damage on Dragon. Yeah, if the Dragon rolls 15 damage and if you roll Inflict Pain on the turn where he rolls 15 damage. A lot has to go right for this to be 15 damage. And I mean, if it is, it's good. But, you know. Fuck you, Wanderer. Sorry, I had to get one in there. I can't hold it in. Fuck you, Wanderer. Let's talk about Grays now. So the grays are pretty easy to divide up. Stalwart, I guess actually this is one where you talk about them in two different capacities, and the reds slightly as well, but less so. You want to think about if you have a source of cleanse in your run. It can come from items, but if it doesn't, you want to consider how bad it is that you don't have cleanse. Stalwart is the guy for cleanse. You're always going to be able to connect with cleanse on a turn where you need it. Not always, but very often going to be able to connect with cleanse on a turn where you need it. Paladin is okay at it, but he's got only one side instead of two. So it's a little more difficult, but he can still connect. For the record, I do also recognize this is technically a cleanse side where you let the character die who needs to be cleansed and then revive them, but it's a little harder to orchestrate. And no one else has cleanse here. Just double checking that. So it's interesting. I think that it's fine to go, like, runs aren't super defined by cleanse, but it's a nice thing to have. And if you're going to be playing some sort of super slow burn build, and if you are going to be doing that, you're probably playing Prophet, by the way, who does not have cleanse. So if you don't have cleanse from your red and you don't have it from your items, consider picking Stalwart to help you out. With that out of the way, Stalwart's good because he brings consistent cleanse, the 2 shields are good, and the 2 cleaves shields are good. Stalwart and Valkyrie both, I'm going to talk about them because they're basically the same character. If you have Angel Feather, you probably auto-win the game. Angel Feather is the one that gives rescue to your top and bottom sides. And yeah, they're both just good. Death Defy and Shield 2 Rescue is good. Everything on Stalwart's sides are good. The res is fine, and sometimes Valkyrie gets to clobber in with an 8 before dying. Very good. Important to note, if you put target ally cannot be killed onto a target, they lose the Death Wish. But, you know, you probably already know that. I think these are the clear top 2 in terms of grays, and we will move on with that in mind. Poet is good. I do like Poet. Poet is a character, if you've been watching throughout the entire time, I actually had a really, like, suspiciously low pick rate of Poet, and for some reason he just did not show up on one of my save files. So, Poet is good though. You have 2 shield 1 cantrips, these are whatever, but they're not terrible. You have these big shield charges. If you get the rescue on top and bottom, Poet can hang in there as well. He can hang. You get the shield 2 to all, so you get big single target shield, and you get shield to all allies, and you get a reuse. Reuse is a great offensive side, alongside some really good defensive sides. I think Poet is good. Paladin's okay. Don't get baited by 4 damage heavy. That's it. I think that a lot of times if you lock this, you're probably making a mistake. 2 mana is good, 3 heal shield is good, shield 4 cleanse is good. Beware. Keeper is okay. I don't think that you need this sort of big shield 5 steal play, but sometimes it'll pair well. I'm not mad to play Keeper, but I'm not excited either. That's the thing. They're just fine. The repel sides is nice, or are nice, I should say. Sometimes they are going to be run defining very good, and sometimes they're going to be, well, nothing, basically. And more often you're going to find them feeling like they're nothing, I think. Mimic is hard to evaluate. I think that on average, though, what I have found, so if you don't know about Mimic, the top and bottom sides are copies of the top and bottom character sides. A lot of times, Mimic is not going to use these sides as well. If you look at it, it's going to be like 2 poison, 3 damage, cantrip 1, 4 damage. Typically speaking, Mimic is going to be pretty bad, but you have to look at it and see if the sides that you're mimicking are worth playing for. And if they are, I mean, hell yeah, dude, play Mimic. One character I want to give an honorable mention to for Mimic, by the way, I didn't talk about it, but there are, of course, synergies between the characters. Specifically, Valkyrie Barbarian. Of course. Valkyrie is just good at giving anyone who is dying an extra life, like Curator, Barbarian, things like that. But anyway, one character that I think Mimic does synergize super well with is Ghast, because you get an extra 2 damage weaken, which is very nice. He also synergizes okay with Artificer. Unfortunately for Mimic, these 2 characters are not often very good, and he's very bad with the characters who are good. I guess he's okay with Weaver. He's okay with Warlock as well. So like some of the mana gain characters he's okay with, but I just haven't seen him too much, as you can see. 16 picks, or 16 options. Granite is fine. I don't like picking Granite. I'm often not one to take Granite. but 12 HP plus the ability to redirect means you can effectively buy a full turn by just redirecting an attack onto you and eating it. But after that, it's kind of tough, and Granite is really bad at helping other characters stay alive other than redirecting. The stun is probably your best bet. Twin is not good. Twin is only really good for death synergies. If you do have death synergies though, Twin is really good at dying, and that is about it. Twin is okay at holding some items like sushi, but if you're only replacing a singular side, you're gonna have a lot of turns where Twin just misses that side and does nothing. Thankfully you have 2 chances to hit, so your odds are a little higher of seeing at least one, but I think you play Twin with death synergies or you don't play Twin at all. Alright, home stretch. In the reds, the reds and the blues, you can divide them up in the same way I did in tier 2. You have your reds who are good at generating mana. Those are Prophet, Doctor, Surgeon, and Wraith. Oh, and Fate, actually. Fate is also good at it in just a different way. Then you have your reds that are good at supporting your team and just offer a little bit of value here and there. Those are Shaman and Witch. And then you have Forsaken. Similarly, in the blues, you have your carry blues. Those are going to be Warlock, Weaver, and Sorcerer. And then you have your supportive blues, which are going to be Kronos and Ghast. And then you have Wizard, who gets to go in his own category, and the 2 clowns. Those are, of course, Ace and Artificer. Spoilers for Ace, by the way. So let's begin. Prophet lets you play very slow. Prophet's spell is Soothe. You get to put a bunch of very slow-burning regen on your team. You also have this very nice rescue side, and the heal 2 mana gain is on the top and bottom, which is a little bit better for item positioning. So overall, of the tier 3 reds to do mana gain, I think Prophet is the best. Heal 4 vitality, big rescue, big mana gain. Important thing to note though, Prophet brings no form of cleanse, which is very good if you don't need a consistent mana generator, or if you can copy this 3 mana for whatever reason, Silk Cape, things like that, Pocket Mirror. If you can do that, then Witch is great for a mana gain as well. But you get a nice boost, you get a nice weaken, you get a huge cleanse, which is great. The heal 3 cleave is fine, but I am not a big believer in this sort of a side. I think you're going to want to reroll typically, but you can keep it if it saves your run, I suppose. And then the spell is good. 1 energy or 1 mana heal 2, that's strong. Which is probably the best of the characters in tier 3 to just play a supportive role of helping the team and letting someone else do the carrying. Doctor is fine. Again, 2 manas is good. The 2 regens are nice, but you're just going to be rolling for mana. And the spell is cool because it's a way to just completely counteract any sort of debuff and full heal. Cleanse 20, heal 20 for 4. It's cool, but it's going to be sometimes hard to cast. We don't talk about 1 damage to all heroes and monsters poison. Fate is good. I actually originally thought Fate was very bad at generating mana, and then I realized that characters who need help generating mana, if you just give them +3, are probably going to get super far ahead. So this side is really good, and if you have any way of like smithing, for example, or just ways to buff the sides, Fate becomes very strong very fast because of heal shield mana gain. When you get these up to the like 3s and 4s, if you can ever do that, these sides are going to be like heal 6 and gain 3 mana. That shit's crazy. Wraith is fine. Nothing special on the mana gain, but you do get this cool 4 damage side and the old cantrip dodge. Sorry, I didn't even mention Fate's spell, by the way. Strand is heal 2 spell rescue. If you save someone with the spell, you get your mana back. It's nice. Fate is bad on longer fights, though, we should say. 3 mana single use, you run out, obviously. Anyway, Wraith is good because you get these big damage sides. You can do 4s with Wraith, so Wraith is a nice pickup early. And you get to just have 2 mana. This side is whatever, the self-heal, self-shield is fine. And cantrip dodge means that, theoretically speaking, if you rolled correctly, Wraith can 1v1 any enemy in this game. Hands down. Given enough rerolls, Wraith wins every fight solo. Surgeon is cool. If you're ever playing a death-based plan, anything where your characters die frequently, you want Surgeon, because A problem with revive is that you have to roll the dice to revive, and so since most characters, and by most I mean all, have their revives on a single side, you can go 2, 3, 4, 5 rolls, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns even, without ever hitting the revive. That problem does not lie with Surgeon because Surgeon has a 4-cost mana revive. So all you have to do is roll mana, which is much more abundant. Surgeon, though, you're probably never locking anything other than mana, which is a bit of a downside, but at least these sides are okay. Shaman is fine. I don't dislike Shaman. The problem I have with Shaman is that 3 damage, 3 shield are pretty underwhelming, but Heal 5 Vitality and Heal 10 are both very good, and this spell is also very good. Heal 2 Cleanse Cleave, the ability to cleanse 2 from 3 targets is great. For 4 mana, hell yeah. But what you're going to find is that the other reds are going to feel a little bit better, because Witch is better at supporting and the other characters are better at generating mana, and a lot of times I think you're better off just generating mana than picking Shaman and going, well, sometimes I'll get good value out of this. But if you do have Ichor Chalice, the one that is... and this one's kind of obvious as a combo, but if you have this item, 1 damage to the topmost enemy for each wasted point of healing you receive, Shaman kind of goes nuts with it. And there are other wasted healing items where Shaman can go well. Someone also dropped a comment on the items video where they had, I think it was Shaman with Change of Heart and Chakram. Change of Heart being this item, replace heal self-heal sides with basic shield sides. And then Chakram being replace shield sides with range damage sides. Suddenly you're dropping 10s with your Shaman, which is pretty fun. Lastly, Forsaken. Forsaken sucks. I'm just gonna say it. I accept that people love Bind as a spell. 3 mana, target ally is immune to damage this turn. It's not immune to death, though, so it does not bypass death sides like Barbarians or Ghasts. The problem that Forsaken has is that if nobody's dead, this is an X. If everyone's full HP, this is an X. So on turn 1, when you're playing with Forsaken, you only have 2 sides that you can even roll for any value. Heal 2 to all is pretty underwhelming in the endgame, and Forsaken has no way to really help a single target survive a big hit other than connecting and spending 3 mana on Bind rather. So, I don't know. The only reason I would ever pick Forsaken is because I had Bonesaw. Any other top-bottom replacer I think makes Forsaken worse, or like not worse, but just not very good. But if you have Bonesaw, you can play Forsaken, and it's okay, but I don't feel like you can build runs to play around reviving, because reviving is inconsistent, and if you miss your revive on the right turns, you're just going to lose. And at that point, your plan is literally just up to dice rolling, which is very much out of your control. But I do respect Bind as a spell. I will give it that. Okay, time for the blues. I already alluded to the carries and the jokers and such, so we'll just go down the list. Warlock is good. He has 2 X's. Actually, no, I want to address Sorcerer first because I think this is important to understand. I don't like Sorcerer. I have determined that I think Sorcerer is actually pretty bad, and here's why. And this is not an all-encompassing feeling. Sorcerer is okay on average, and you can pick them, but something that you're going to realize is that if you're trying to approach this game from the perspective of winning a lot of runs in a row, if you play Sorcerer 100 times, eventually, or like 1,000 times, infinite times, however many times, eventually you're going to run into a position where you're rolling like XXXXX mana. The problem with this, of course, is that this is not good. If you roll like, and this is actually a reasonable turn that Sorcerer could roll for you. If you roll X mana X, that's 1 mana. Your blue generated you 1 mana, and that's not that crazy of a situation. The problem that Sorcerer faces is that when you connect, it's not that good, and there's too many X's. Now, the important thing to note here is that this is Sorcerer as a baseline. There are many, many items which make Sorcerer very good. Magic Staff to give you more mana, Sickle to give you +1 to all your 1s, Chain is really good, Triple Shuriken, things like that, right? And it's also good if you have ways for other characters to provide you with rerolls. The problem that you're going to face with Sorcerer, though, is that if you pick this character prospectively, you can just miss everything and have your blue be effectively a dead character. So it's going to be very hit or miss based on how good your items are for Sorcerer and how good your team is at supporting Sorcerer. But I wanted to say that piece first because it's going to weigh over me, because I'm going to talk about Warlock from the perspective of having 2 X's now. But just know, Sorcerer is probably the most item-dependent character in this game other than Statue, where if Sorcerer is good, he's going to... You can remember the highs, right? In the highs with Sorcerer, you're generating like 60 mana in a turn, and you're just blowing away entire fights with cleaving. And in the lows, you're generating no mana and dying. It's important to make sure you understand the distinction. There are good times for Sorcerer and bad, and it matters to talk about this first because I'm now going to talk about Warlock. Warlock also has 2 X's. The thing is, Warlock has 3 high impact sides, and doesn't need any items, which is why I think Warlock is the best at carrying your run of the blues. Warlock, item independent, shows up, drops 4 mana, your blue gives him 2, he drops a 13 into an enemy, they die. That's good. The rest of it is whatever. There are many items which are good for Warlock, of course. There are many ways to make Warlock good. Anything to cover up his pain, self-heal with Tiara, things like that. Silk Cape is good to make sure he has no X's. Natural is even good, but ultimately I think Warlock is one of the best for carrying your run just because he shows up, he does big damage, and then he leaves, much like Barbarian. But he has some inconsistency. The difference is that for Warlock to have a bad turn, he has to roll XXX. Let's move on to Weaver. Weaver is interesting. Weaver is also extremely swingy, but if you can play the charge side twice on Weaver, you probably won the run. It's important to make sure that you don't lock charged blind, because this is an X if you don't have another source of mana. It's important to be wary. Weaver is also a character who wants you to bank mana up so that you can roll for the charged. My feeling about Weaver is that if you have no mana banked, you should be rolling for this 3 mana side and settling for a 3 mana single use if you have 1 or 0 rerolls left. And if you have 2 rerolls, you should be rolling for 3 mana, or ideally building up to a big charged play. And sometimes you log dodged because Hexy is about to bulldoze you. But Weaver is good. This spell will carry a lot of fights for you, and he does pretty well. Wizard has very, very quickly risen to be my favorite character in the game. And it wasn't obvious to me immediately why Wizard is so strong, but it's because of Inspire. So, Wizard is good because what you can do with Wizard is buff this side. First of all, if you have any way to put Echo on Wizard, Duck, or Dolphin, you basically automatically win, because you get, even if it's just 5, right? Even if you can Echo up to like 5 or 4, which is a conservative number, you get to do 4 damage, Inspire, 4 damage, and then cash out any mana that you just gained. Basically, Wizard, if you can make these numbers higher than 1 in any way, will carry your run. This will be Echo, this will be Smith, this will just be a big perma boost even can do it. And all of a sudden, enemies are going to start evaporating to the massive mana gain Inspire combos, or just even some cantrips here and there. He's very, very good at just taking over when you give him the right support. Without the right support, this character is very bad, but I have had a lot of runs in a row where the right support is just natural to have. But something like Dolphin Wizard I think wins almost any position. Dolphin Wizard Berserker, for example, or sorry, Dolphin Wizard Barbarian just hard wins any place. He's very good. I think Wizard is great, honestly. I love this character. He's so much fun. I already talked about Sorcerer. You can go back and re-listen to that if you would like. On the whole, I think Sorcerer is good on average, but you have to be careful that the lows don't ruin your day, which is what you have to, like, that can happen with Sorcerer. If you're rolling X1X, you're just dying. Chronos. Chronos has fallen from grace. Chronos was my 100% pick rate character. It's a shift in styles, for sure. This character is good because he brings you reroll. He's basically a new Jester. Brings you reroll to help your other characters hit, and he brings you a reuse. Very nice. He also has a great spell, 1 damage, weaken, cleave, extremely strong. One thing that you're going to notice though is that if you're playing Chronos, I have found anyway, it's really hard to cast this spell. It's just hard. Like, it actually is just very hard to cast this spell. 1 damage, weaken, cleave, 4 mana. Chronos is really bad at making mana. He only gets 2. So your mana has to come from over here, but if you picked Chronos, you're probably picking Witch or Shaman. You don't have to, but that's what I tend to do, and then it's hard to find mana from these characters to give you enough to connect with Weaken. But if you have mana from other sources, of course, the spell is good. Chronos also has a dodge. He's good at staying alive. He's good at supporting your team. He's just all around a good support, but he's never going to carry you across the finish line. You're not going to generate 500 mana from your growth and then blow someone away with slow. Ghast is okay. The 2 damage weaken is really, really good, and if you have any way to bring Ghast back to life, I think you're actually okay to play him, because 5 mana death is good. But what you're going to find often is that Ghast is more trouble than he's worth. It's a lot of effort to make this character not garbage, and I don't know, man. Give him like stasis and then treat him as a 2 weaken bot. His spell is really good though. Kill an enemy with 1 HP for 3 mana. This shit's so strong. People always overlook this spell, I feel like. It's so good to just get that 1 damage reach and then gain 2 mana for it. That's sick. Yeah, I like Ghast. I just feel like tier 3 blues are run defining and Ghast is not run defining. But in a run where you're playing like Surgeon Roulette and you're just rezzing a bunch, sure, throw Ghast in the mix, why not? And then the clowns. Artificer isn't terrible, but Artificer is another sort of get me across the finish line, or not even get me across the finish line, get me there character, where you play Artificer and you have him help you kill like AoE fights in Combat 12 and 14 to help your Scrapper get enough Bloodlust to clear out the fights. The problem is he runs out of gas really fast, and he only actually has 2 sides I want to play. 4 mana single use are it. Everything else here sucks. 2 damage charged, it's okay, but it takes a lot of setup to make this really worth playing. And he's the mana gain guy. So what are you gonna do? Play this for 4 because you got 2 mana off of a red? I doubt it. Yeah, I mean, overall, I just feel like you don't want to play Artificer because he has nothing to play. You can combo him with Stasis, but even then it's like, oh boy, I get to play 2 damage poison multiple times? I'm playing for 10 heal single use? If these sides were better, if these single uses across the middle were better, I think he'd be better. But Blades is okay at getting you through some scary mid-game fights if you have no way to kill multiple enemies. Ah, here he is. Ah, the poor guy. Okay. Throughout this video and throughout playing this game, I have said many times, I don't want to make generalizations. Every character in this game, you can come up with some use case. 99 out of 100 characters in this game, you can come up with some use case. This is the exception. Ace is, in no uncertain terms, unplayable. I'm sorry. I really, really am sorry, because I love the concept of Ace. I think this character is so cool, but let me take you on a bit of a journey. First of all, this is a 3 mana triple, this is a 2 mana pair, and this is a 1 mana. And then the spell is 3 mana, shield 1 boost. This spell is so bad that it is worse in mana efficiency than burst. If you are playing this on a single use side of any description, you are gaining burst, but for 3 mana instead of 2. You're getting 1 shield and 1 damage. If you're playing this on a double use side, you're getting 1 shield and 2 damage, which is still like worse than burst. What the hell is 1 shield doing for you? So there's really only one case for Ace. I hate to say this, but I do have to give you synergies in this video. There's one character in this universe who can make a good mana value usage out of Ace. Mr. Quad Use himself, Old Wanderer. Yeah, no, this spell is so bad. I cannot stress this enough. There is no world, no game mode, no universe I can imagine where I would want to play this. The only thing I can think of that people will say to me is that you can use draw to set other characters up with like a +1 or like a +1 to then set up a triple. And that's kind of cool. That idea is neat. You're getting a little bit of value and then you're getting this big mana boost back. The problem is that he only has 2 sides like this, man. You're gonna end up missing more often than not, and you have to have mana banked in the tank to set up and give yourself a +1 in order to get the pair to get your mana back to then go spend your mana on something better. It's just so sad. I just wish that this was better. I love the idea of this character. He just triple X's and nothing. I don't know. Give him like 2 more pairs or something. Even then, I don't know, man. I don't have any ideas. Ace, don't play this character. I think that something worth mentioning at the end of this video is I'd like to say a little bit about the death rolls you can have, because I think that one of the things that's going to be really difficult to navigate are the worst case rolls, and you want to look out for these so that you can kind of have them in mind and understand that this can happen to you early or late and brick a run for you. So I think that some of the death rolls that you can see are things like Ace versus Twin on Combat 12 going into a hard boss. That is the sort of thing that you have to be trying to at least consider a little bit. Now, you don't want to be planning your whole run around this. You don't want to be sitting there going, oh, well, what am I going to do about Ace versus Twin? It's obviously a very low likelihood, but it's something to think about if you're looking at 2 items that are both useless. If one of them can be useless later, you want to think about it from the perspective of how does this cover a bad roll? Now, more importantly, I think you want to think about this for things like Statue versus Medic going into the first boss, where you can be a little low. This would be a bad roll. Something like, I don't know, Cleric versus Medic, Cleric versus Enchanter, things like that, right? These characters that are towards the lower end of my pick rates, but it's not just enough to say it like that, because then you would say like, oh, well, what about Rogue versus Sinew? I mean, that's fine. You probably play Rogue there, but maybe Sinew. It's just important to keep in mind and try to think about how you're going to overcome a worst case from the game, as well as, you know, how the items can help you along the way. But realistically speaking, if I were to pick a bottom 4 for the characters in this game, the worst character in this game is Ace. I think after that it's probably like Twin, Statue, Forsaken, or maybe like Twin, Forsaken, Wanderer. I don't know, it's something like that. But it's not super important to think about it like that. The only character who has 0 use case, no redemption is Ace. Every other character you can do something with. Alright, I'm done talking. Thanks for watching. I had fun. I have fun just doing these kind of conversational videos and talking out my thoughts. It actually helps me a lot too, to recognize things that I haven't thought about before. And I like reading your comments and seeing if you guys have any cool ideas. So let me know. And for now, thanks for watching. I will see you. There should be another normal video later tonight. I didn't do one after the items list, but this video was shorter. So, and I also don't feel as tired, but we'll see. For now, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one. We probably are going to talk about Baron and Basalt in the next one, but we'll see. Have a good one.